This is Conversations at the Dallas Public Library. I'm Erv Eatenson. We're talking today with Reverend A.A. Taliaferro, a Dallas religious leader for 40 years. Father Taliaferro has presented his sermons to the Dallas Public Library in the form of tapes and transcripts, and they're a priceless bringing together of religious thought and philosophy. Father Taliaferro is rector of St. Alcuin's Community Church, which he founded in Dallas in 1964. He's also founder and president of St. Alcuin's Montessori School. He founded St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church in Dallas in 1945 and was its rector for 17 years. His theological training was at Yale and Northwestern. He is pastor, priest, philosopher, educator, counselor. He's also a Jungian, a musician, a Rosicrucian, and Father Taliaferro, wasn't there some Buddhist training?
There was.
And where and when?
I became interested in Buddhism when I was at the University of Michigan during the 30s, when there was much unrest in America because of the Depression and the failure of the economic system and the political systems of the world to give satisfaction to people, and there was much emotional and religious unrest also. And on the campus of the University of Michigan, there were Orientals who came to the University of Michigan to study there, and they had created a Buddhist temple. And because of my conversations with them, I went to the temple, and for a all too brief period of time, I was converted to Buddhism and practiced Buddhism. You don't have to do anything to become a Buddhist except just practice Buddhism.
Yes.
But it was a great experience for me. It gave me great insight into the meaning of religion.
And has doubtless continued to
Yes.
be an influence. I
Yeah.
imagine you never really forget it.
Yes. Buddhism is an integral part of all religious thought of the world.
Yes.
It's basically mystical. It is a teaching of the nature of the human consciousness. In Buddhism, the word soul or the word God is never mentioned in the way that we think of those as entities. They talk about the human being and his oneness with true being, you know.
And integration is
integration of the
is the
consciousness.
center.
Mhm.
Let's talk about religion in Dallas from your earliest times as I believe you were an organist at St. Matthew's Cathedral when you were 14.
That's right.
And it seems to me as a native Dallasite that we've come a long way in religion in Dallas, and would you discuss that?
Well, as I look back, I remember there were very few churches in Dallas when I was a child. I was born and raised here, and because of my musical talent, I came in contact with the Episcopal Church at about age 12 through my teacher, who was the organist and choirmaster of St. Matthew's, when old St. Matthew's Cathedral was on the corner of Erv and Canton Street.
Right.
And the church was a center of religious feeling and thinking in the city of that day. The Jewish synagogue was another center. The big First Baptist Church was another center. The Roman Catholic Cathedral, which is now Our Lady of Guadalupe down here on Harwood,
Yes, right.
was another center. And the Methodist Church, the First Methodist Church, was another center, and so forth and so on. Now, there were smaller churches, different places, but those were primarily the establishments, you know.
Yes.
And as far as I can remember, there were absolutely no references at any time from anybody that I talked to of any so-called new thought or any variations on the fundamental approach to religion.
Now, of course, the Unitarian Church had been established Well, it was, I believe, in 1899 in Dallas, so it was here. I don't know
Yeah.
how large a congregation it was.
It wasn't very much of a factor, though. It was very
Yeah.
small. It's kind of like the Christian Science group.
Yes.
They were very small. They were powerful. I mean, they were very influential in certain ways, but they were not a political or social influence in the way that those other churches were, you know.
Now we have a very broader diversity today.
Oh, today you have, we have many churches, we have several community-type churches. We have the Unitarian Church, of course. We have the Unity churches, and we have the many Christian Science congregations.
And then the new ethnic groups.
We have new ethnic groups. Mm-hmm. And the various denominations have grown, but there's a very liberal viewpoint in these various groups, except the Southern Baptists and the
Yes.
and the Roman Catholics. You know, even the Roman Catholics have a liberal viewpoint now.
Yes. Well, I guess they always have had. Oh, you mean in Dallas?
In Dallas.
All right.
Yeah, I personally know priests who are rather liberal in their thinking, their private thinking, and of course they don't try to express themselves apart from the church. But in the period of time that we're talking about, religion has played a great role in the city of Dallas, but it has also been influenced by more liberal and free-thinking people who've come to Dallas from various parts of the country and have influenced religion.
Right.
And one of the things that's happened is that religion has become more mystical. Now, by mystical, I simply mean that the inner religious experience of the individual is a much more important thing than the dogma and the teaching of the church.
Yes.
In certain ways. And there are many people in Dallas who, for example, believe in reincarnation because inwardly they have some certainty that there must be some explanation for the differences in people, and the explanation is that people have had certain experiences in previous incarnations, and they are born in this incarnation, bringing over from the past those influences which make them what they are.
And that explanation works where no other would.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I've asked you to think about Dallas and religion earlier is because I feel that there is a different direction, and consciousness and the reincarnation would be factors in this. In the 60s, we had a God is dead movement, and so many people were turned off by that phrase that the message was lost in some quarters. But I believe that was a beginning. And how do you feel they were trying to direct us? What were those people saying, the God is dead people?
Well, for me, they were saying that the old teaching about the nature of God as a personal God and as a God who personally was concerned with all the details of the way we felt in our personal situation in life and all that, all of that is gone.
It's authoritarian, and
yeah.
It didn't involve us sufficiently.
No. Instead of presenting God as a universal state of consciousness and as a cosmic state of being, an energy, which is his body, and his consciousness, which is the universal cosmic consciousness, and having created the universe and being what he is, we're part of that, and we have to some degree his consciousness, and we are responsible for what we are, and he's already given us all his wonderful gifts and all of the powers which are his, and we have those powers within us right now, and we are responsible for the use of them. And God simply, after having given us all his gifts and continuing to pour out upon us all of his great powers, he gives us the freedom and the opportunity to live our life. And we learn this way. This is the reason we are called children of God. We are growing and becoming more godlike by growing out of our childhood through many incarnations into the great wisdom and stature of Christ, as St. Paul refers to it.
Yes. Well, now how do we deal with terrorism and the nuclear threat and crime without conscience in this frame of reference?
Well, these are big political and economic subjects, but actually, in my personal opinion, the way that we're going to deal with world problems now and in the future is through a great world religion and a great emphasis upon future education, which includes religion with science.
And there has to be an intelligence that is acceptable to all.
That's right. An explanation of that intelligence.
And not a handing down.
The thing that is true in the past has got to be known to be true in the future, and that is all religions and all aspects of any religion are essentially teaching exactly the same thing.
Yes.
They emphasize different aspects of the teaching, but nevertheless it's all the same.
There's a bringing together of science and religion that has been happening for some time. Would you comment on that?
Well, the church created the educational systems in the Western world that eventually brought forth what, to the church's consternation, was the Renaissance and the resurgence of scientific thought, especially through Sir Francis Bacon and people like Galileo and so forth. And when their great ideas came on the scene, the church immediately tried to squelch them because they were scientific ideas. And in spite of the fact that St. Thomas Aquinas said that when there is a paradox between and an apparent conflict between two opposites, such as truth by faith and truth by science or worldly faith or worldly knowledge, you've got to accept the truth as it is presented to you by faith, whatever that really means.
Yes.
We don't really know. But St. Thomas Aquinas, even in all of his genius, didn't know how to bring together the two opposites to satisfy the dogmas of the church of that day. Today, we now know, in studying the religious history of mankind, that early religion was in fact a great science. In other words, it was the effort on the part of the great teachers and the founders of all great civilizations, who were the religious leaders of those days. It was their intention to present the nature of the material world and the nature of man's consciousness, which we call the soul, the nature of the great being who created all of this and holds it in existence, and so forth. And it was a science. They taught techniques of scientific perception, such as meditation, where enough people, if you could become conscious of the things that they were referring to, then you were a scientist, because you were aware mentally as well as sensorily of those facts.
Well, you had that instruction.
Yeah, that's right. And today, modern science is simply a technique by which the teaching about the physical world can be verified in what we call a scientific technique. The religion of the future is going to be a technique by which the nature of the mind, the nature of the soul, the nature of the human feeling apparatus, the power of will, the nature of love and wisdom, all of those are words referring to the functionings of certain energies.
Yes.
And when we begin to function those in our relationships to each other, then we will become scientists in the laboratory of human life.
We're even hearing medicine begin to emphasize the importance of spirit in the healing process.
Right. I had two doctors in my class last night who were talking about the nature of the soul and the psychic body of the soul as it leaves the physical body at death. I mean, this is really something. Medical persons who have had medical training, one of these doctors is an eye doctor, the other is a pathologist, and they were discussing what they have seen around the human body and in the human body, and at death what seems to come out of the human body, which is the energy which we call the soul.
Oh, so
it's an actual energy.
They have observed
Yeah.
enough to want to know more.
And I've observed this many times.
Yeah.
And this is a scientific fact. If enough people are able to experience that and realize it, and then pool their findings and their experiences together, as in that very important book, I think, called Life After Life,
Yes.
written by a professor of psychiatry at, I think, Duke University, or one of the great universities. And he gets the information together from many, many different people about what happens after death. And they all tell the same story. And when you get enough people all over the world doing this, then human experience becomes scientific. This is really Jungian, you know.
Yes.
Dr. Jung says that a scientific fact in psychology is the realization that you are inwardly experiencing something and giving meaning to that, and that is a scientific fact, if that's true. And he says that that's very important, and if enough people do that, then he calls this the archetype, you know, the universal symbol, like the Virgin Mary in Christianity. Many people have experienced within themselves the Virgin Mary. This becomes a scientific fact. And it stands for something that all people have in common within themselves, which is the functioning of a state of consciousness, the functioning of certain energies that teaches mankind something, you see.
Well, let's talk about reincarnation. Now, you've been teaching Rosicrucian work for 50 years?
Well, I have been teaching, but the background, the basis for all my teaching is the influence of the Rosicrucian order on me. The Rosicrucian order is sort of a great university. I mean, it teaches all the subjects of every university.
It is a university, isn't it?
Yeah.
In San Jose?
Yeah. It's a school, really.
Yeah.
And it's worldwide, and it puts all these various subjects together, including world religions and science and philosophy and history and all the various subjects you find in the university. And the reincarnation principle is given to the students because up until 553 A.D., Christians accepted reincarnation as a matter of fact. And it was only when it became a problem in the doctrine of the person of Christ, which maybe technically we don't have time to go in here now.
Probably not.
But the fact is that when it became a problem, then they said it is better to do away with the doctrine of reincarnation because it reminds people of Oriental influences. And so they outlawed it in the Council of Constantinople in 553. But the human being today still knows within himself that he has lived forever and that he's going to live forever, and he just cannot figure out how that is because he has not been taught in so many centuries that this is true.
And what is the process
of teaching?
Of reincarnation?
Well, the soul and the personality, the soul is the divine aspect which gives life and which gives consciousness to the person. The body is the means by which he is able to make contact with the material energies called the physical world. And it is the purpose of life, according to this doctrine, to accumulate knowledge and wisdom down through the ages, down through the centuries and thousands of years, so that eventually we perfect ourselves. And our knowledge and experience and the ability to be of value in the process, that is, God's great divinity is value. In other words, he wants to give himself to mankind, and he then wants us to give ourselves to this process of helping people understand. And so the soul and the personality come together in the incarnation. The soul brings the personality into the body. The personality is the accumulation of all knowledge and wisdom from the past incarnations. Like a tape recording is the accumulation of everything that's on the tape from past recordings. And in that particular incarnation, the purpose of the soul is fulfilled. The next step in the development of the personality is taken. Then when that has been accomplished, the soul, as it were, issues the order and the extraction process begins. And the soul, when it leaves the body, from the standpoint of the material world, creates the condition called death. But from the standpoint of the soul, it's really life. It's really resurrection. And the soul is raised out of the material world, and it becomes conscious of itself on its own plane. The human being does not change consciousness as he passes from the material to the non-material. He remains exactly the same. He's conscious of all of his faculties. He can make contact with and he's aware of his loved ones and his friends. He can do in his consciousness what he's always done in his body. He has the same sensations. All of his weaknesses are still there. All of his strengths are still there.
Well, now, yes, there is a difference between when he has learned a lesson
Oh yeah,
and when he progresses.
Yeah, when he's learned the lesson and he has incorporated that lesson into the personality, then that's one more block, as it were, that has been built into the temple, of consciousness.
Right.
And he is able then to say that he's learned that, and he uses that then to learn the next lesson.
And at what point is the process unending?
Well, theoretically and actually, there is a world being called the Masters, who live on the soul plane. And that's called the Kingdom of Heaven in the Christian religion. And the Kingdom of Heaven, or Nirvana, is that plane of being which we call soul, upon which these perfected beings live. They're the saints in Christianity. And we are attaining to that. But when we arrive at that point at some time in the future, for many of us it's in the far distant future, undoubtedly, but when we do arrive at that, then we will be in a position to really serve mankind, and really help. They are the angels. They are the messengers of God.
And at some point they were old souls, doubtless, on earth, and people knew there was a wisdom.
Yeah, they were the teachers of men. They were the teachers of human beings.
Right. What is meditation?
Well, meditation in all this is a technique by which the mind is taken off of its attention to the physical body and the physical world, and it is taken away from the emotional feeling nature, and it is directed toward the world of pure being or mind, thought. The mind can concentrate upon itself, and you become conscious of the fact that you're in the world of soul. The mind is really the soul functioning in the material body, and it uses energies called mental energy. But when the mind can take its attention away from the physical world and the emotional world and put it upon the pure world of conceptual thought, abstract thought, you are in true meditation. When you can hold your mind concentrated upon a thought which represents some divine state of being for you,
And when you are in true meditation, how do you take advantage of this? What are you experiencing beyond this pure state?
Well, the purpose of that is while we're still incarnated on the material plane, we can receive energies from on high. And we are emotionally and mentally stimulated and revitalized, and we're kept young, as it were.
Yes.
And we can be given inspiration and direction. So when we come back into the consciousness of the material world, we have planted in our minds as a seed or as a thought the things that we can do and the plans that we can accomplish, The soul, in other words, is able to direct us in this method.
Now, you've recommended periodic life review for the individual who is growing and knows it, and instinctively I know what you're saying, but I want to ask you briefly to clarify that.
The life review?
The life review.
Well, we ought to review our life because we need to build in the consciousness a conscious relationship between the present and the past and the past and the present and the future. If we can't do that, then we don't learn the greatest lesson we need to learn, and that is the lesson of cause and effect. The thing that we can become conscious of is what causes things to be what they are, and what causes our life to be what it is. And if we want to change our life, then we change the causes.
Right.
If we want to change the future and what it's inevitably to become because of the present, then we can change the present and make the future what we want it to be, if we can become conscious of what that is. And that's what the Orientals call karma.
It's what management calls accountability.
Accountability.
I know that music has had a major part in your life, and it's probably been a metaphysical factor for you, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And you've said that your personal trinity is Einstein, Monteur, and Jesus.
Yeah, that's right.
You were a student of Pierre Monteur.
I was a student of Pierre Monteur for about almost 4 years.
Yeah.
I studied with him in France, and I worked with him in San Francisco, and he was a tremendous influence in my life, musically and personally. I knew him and his family real well. I never had the good fortune to meet Einstein, although he and I, in the early part of my life, were living at the same time. But I've read everything that he's written. I don't understand his mathematics, but I do understand his philosophies to some degree. He was a great advocate of world peace, like the great Master Jesus, and like Monteur, and like the great Buddha, and like the great Mohammed, and like the great Isaiah. They wanted peace. They realized that the purpose of life is to establish right human relationships, which is peace.
So it was a positive frame.
Monteur was a great genius.
Yes.
And Monteur was able to create conditions of sound in auditoriums that would just take the consciousness right out of the physical body for a person who's sensitive, and he would be able to feel and think in terms of what we call metaphysical states of realization. Though.
Father Taliaferro, we're running out of time. I had wanted to ask you about the series that you did for your congregation last year on the religion of the future, and there's so much we could talk about. But I want to explain to our audience that the Dallas Public Library has received and is processing sermons and classes of Father Taliaferro, and these are in the form of tapes and transcripts. It'll take quite a while for us to process them, but they represent the body of thought here of philosophy and religion of one of our major religious figures in the community. Father Taliaferro, I want to thank you on behalf of the library and the community for the gift, and I'm so pleased that you were able to come and be on Conversations.
I thank you for being here.
This has been Conversations. We've been talking with Reverend A.A. Taliaferro, rector of the St. Alcuin's Community Church of Dallas. I'm Erv Eatenson for the Dallas Public Library. Welcome to Conversations. I'm Erv Eatenson. We're continuing our conversation with A.A. Taliaferro, Dallas minister, counselor, teacher, mystical philosopher. Father Taliaferro, we're very glad that you took the time to come and agree to resume a dialogue that I found fascinating.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here.
In 1984, you did a series for the congregation at St. Alcuin's Community Church on the religion of the future. And it's that body of knowledge that I'd like for us to focus on today. Traditionally, where have we been in America in religion?
In the past, and even at the present time, we're still dominated by the fundamentalistic, literalistic approach to the interpretations in religion. And this has resulted in the fragmentation of religion in America, what we call denominations and sectarianism. But there is a growing movement, a transition. It's up to now been rather underground, that we might call mystical, and could be called occult. It could be called metaphysical. There's many other names that have been used in the past to describe the meanings of the Bible and the meanings of religion, the meanings of symbolism, and so forth and so on, in terms of human consciousness, rather than in terms of the literalistic going to church and abiding by the doctrines and the moral precepts and so forth. And this period in America was really the means by which the people of the past were able to hold to the ideas which unleashed the energies that made America great. But the time has come when that energy has got to be redirected toward understanding not only of the meaning of America and the work that has been done and must be done to make America what it should be, but also understanding of the world. In other words, we've got to come to some understanding of religion and of humanity in order to realize our oneness with the peoples of the world, the oneness of all religion, and the oneness of all nations, all political and economic philosophy.